Welcome. Welcome to our new talk based on one of the greatest influence of modern philosophy, Western philosophy, is about Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher. So this talk is not confined to only one, but it will be based on 2, 3, 4, or 6 talks. So you have to be with us for all these talks. You need to subscribe in order to get these talks free. This is one of the most difficult philosophers. One of the most difficult philosophers to understand because of his terminology, because of his difficult prose pieces in the books. So you have to be very attentive when we start Immanuel Kant. We'll study his books. The name of his books would give an idea what was his philosophy. So it's very important to remember the name of his books. So I write the name, we'll study, that is Critique of Pure Reason. Critique of Pure Reason. And then we have this, I will write here reason. Then we have another one important, that's Critique of Practical Reason. First they were like essays. Critique of Practical Reason. Practical Reason, and then Critique of Pure Judgment. Critique of Judgment. Critique of Judgment. And some of the important essays, important books, like he did write was about the morals. He did write about nebular hypothesis in science, for this, the motion of the solar system and the stuff of solar system, what's solar system made of, and also we'll talk about these imperatives, whether the imperatives are of category type or these hypothetical or theoretical, what we say, imperatives, and then a lot more we will talk about Immanuel Kant. And what we call metaphysics. He was interested in metaphysics, and he was, I would say, a lot of work he did for metaphysics, for ethics. So Kant, I would say he was born in April 22. April 22. So this talk is based on mostly the biographical element about the Kant. So he was born April 22, 1724, 1724, and he died 1804. Almost 80 years. He did live 80 years, and it is said that he died because he lost the conscience and consciousness, and he died because of that very the stroke type. He was born in Königsberg, that time in Prussia. Now you have the area in Russia, and a German philosopher he was interested in metaphysics, he was interested in epistemology, he was interested in what we don't really call him an idealist, but we call him, like, we think that German idealism started from that, so we call German idealism. So he was born, and his father was he was a saddle maker for the horses, saddle maker for the animals. He was doing that work, the work of the harness. And then he was having one more thing. The Immanuel Kant was having a very disciplined life. Which started from the very home. How? Because their parents, they were religious. They were following the pietism. That was a revolutionary movement that was based on the the linguistical evaluation what we have there in the religious scriptures. So that was a bit, I would say, I would not say fully the radical, but a bit modified form. That was, thus he was from that background, but later in life we will see that he did renounce even that thing when he came across different philosophies. And we see two more important things we have to go through in this talk. That is how he tried his whole of his life to make a path in between rationalists and the empiricists. So I write here rationalists and empiricists. Rationalists, or the rationalism and empiricism. So the rationalists, when we're talking about, we have the two great figures or three figures. We have these Descartes, we have Descartes, and we have others. And in empiricism, we have the figures like Berkeley, figures like David Hume, and figures like what we call this John Locke. And when we are talking about Berkeley, we have his name as what we call materialist or material idealist as well. So we know that the rationalists, they believe in the pure reason. They believe in the pure reason. And mostly the empiricists, they believe in the practical reason. They believe in the practical reason. Thus two terms were introduced. Those two terms this talk is based on. That is, one term was priori and posteriori. Posteriori. So if you are with me, you will understand today what priori is and what posteriori is. See, when a child is born, we know that he doesn't know anything. Normally the common people do talk that he doesn't know anything. There is nothing written in his name. He is born a plain person, he is born a plain baby, he is born with a blank slate. What was believed also by John Locke. So John Locke's term, it was the first term John Locke did say, that everyone is born as a blank slate, what we call as tabula rasa. We call as tabula rasa. Tabula rasa. And about John Locke, you know that he was a constitutional philosopher. I call him a constitutional philosopher. And he was an empiricist. What empiricism is all about? The empiricism is like this. If I work here for 2 years, if I work here in this language academy for 2 years, I will say that I got experience of different things. And this experience will become knowledge for me. Maybe somebody will say that what you got there in 2 years, can you explain? And when I explain the 2 years work here, the 2 years what I learned here and what I taught here for 2 years and the events I came across, and it will become the knowledge for others, and they will say, oh, he has a great knowledge. So this is empiricism. Once you experience things, you are going to get knowledge more and more and more in your life. That's called empiricism. And that's based on practical reason. How the practical reason? If there is a mountain top and you have to go, and there are two ways, you chose a different way. And I would question you, why didn't you go through this way? This is the shortest possible way to go to the mountain top. Maybe you would say that, you don't know, I have the experience. There are snakes, there are wild animals on the path. They may eat me, they may attack me. So that's why I did chose that way. And because I had this experience once. That means you had this knowledge before, and you have this knowledge now too, that this is not the way to go because there are wild animals. This is what we call what you see with your eyes. So the perception works in empiricism, what we call perception. I call here perception. So John Locke, Berkeley, David Hume, mostly we would say about a perception. What in perception we do have? We perceive with 5 different senses when we're talking about. The sense of touch you have, the sense of this sight, you see with your eyes, with the help of your eyes, you hear with the help of your ear, and you see with the help of your eyes, you taste with the help of your tongue, and touch, and you smell with the help of your nose. So these all become the experiencing agencies for you. And this becomes a knowledge for you. That means you have the perception when you are talking about empiricism. But what was the most beautiful thing that was of Kant? He criticized this, that no, it's not only that a child is born as a tabula rasa, it's not possible only. But he said that he believed also that what the rationalists believe. What the rationalists believed. We know the rationalists believe that child or every person has a mapping, what we call innate mapping, that the divine book is within every person. And that's a pure reason. And when Immanuel Kant has to make you understand what exactly is the pure reason. Pure reason is that when you believe in something, there is no reason to reject it. There is no reason to reject it. This may have become a great agnostic philosophy later in the life of Immanuel Kant, because some of the people, they blamed him to be now with the agnosticism. Maybe because he lost his senses also, the consciousness. In agnosticism, what we say that it's very difficult to reject what's your belief about the divine, and it's very difficult to even prove that. He can, but I don't think so. But I would say here that when you have your innate ideas about God, for example, that this is the innate, this is the purest reason. God is there and He is there. There's no need to prove it, because this is the pure reason. And about the mathematics, for example, he gives the example, if I say here 8 plus 2 is equal to 10. And 10 is always there. This 10 does not depend on 8 and 2. This is there independently, this 10. So there is no need to give a practical reason for this, even if it's a synthetic one. So this is a priori. Priori means the previous knowledge, the beginning, the knowledge in the essence. What idealists call essence. That means what's your essence? Or some religious philosophies do believe that your soul was somewhere in the abode of souls before, and then it was brought, and those souls, they did accept the call of Allah that time, and some did not accept the call of Allah, and that means that they have the previous information. That means when a person is born, he has the previous information with that person, and that's called priori knowledge. That's called priori. And the knowledge which you gain and which is dependent on the practical reason, which is dependent on your experience, and that's called the posterior knowledge, posteriori knowledge. Now, they were supported by some of the scientific branches like nativism, what we call in genetics. Let me give an example how people are born with innate ideas, how people are born with innate information. That means the information provided by God. So the priori knowledge is that there is God, and God gave you the innate ideas about different things, and also the innate information in the cells. And let me introduce here one of the concepts. Every one of you may have, let me rub it also, every one of you may have come across the concepts like, we have the concepts given by Mendel. Mendel was a great figure of genetics, and he led the principle of inheritance. Let me introduce here the concept. Mendel was highly interested, and he was very interested in mathematics and natural science. And he devised the table of what we call inherited characters. See, if we have a tall parent here and a pure tall, let me denote this pure tall. He worked on the pea plants in the garden, and these are the tall plants, and let me consider this is the short plant. And when we cross these alleles, these genes, for example, we cross with T, it becomes TT, 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 and TT. See, these all the four, this what we call, this is called first generation. What we call is the first filial generation in science. All the progeny, all these will be tall. This was a tall plant, this was a short plant. But the plants you get now in the first generations, that's tall. But the phenotypically, what we call the external characters say you that these are tall, but you don't know about the inner one, that there is also one short information. one shot information. That means when you cross it, now you take this one and this one, you marry them, and when you see the progeny, you just get T and T, and then you get T and T, and then you get T and T again with this, and then T and T small here. So all the three here, they are tall, and one is there that's dwarf, what we call recessive, that's short. This is 3:1 ratio. That means when you are just talking about the second generation, you can say before that there will be one short and three will be there tall. So how do you know that one will be there short and three will be tall? This is the information already there in the genes. And genes carry the information for this plant, whether you have to be a short plant or whether you have to be a very long or tall plant. So there is genetic mapping, what we call genetic information, genetic bank. There's a bank of the information there in the genes, which makes you a person in the future generations, and somebody could predict about that very prediction. For example, you have a hybrid, nowadays you have hybrid fruits, you have hybrid tomatoes, and you can predict that in the second generation we cannot get those much big tomatoes and that much, I would say that that much abundance of the tomatoes, because there is inbreeding depression. And you can predict it before because the information is there in the genes. So for this, we'd say that, yeah, innate characters, what we call the pure reason, which is the belief of the rationalists. And the biggest rationalist we have, that was the Plato. And Plato's idealism carry this, because Plato says that this is dependent on the pure reason. That means pure rational thinking. That means the priori knowledge is about the pure reason, and the posteriori knowledge is about the knowledge gained by the experience. The whole of his life he did work, and he did work whole of his life to find a middle path in between this rationalism and between rationalism and this what we call empiricism. So he neither believed totally on rationalists, neither he believed on empiricists. That's why we call him the man of the critical philosophy. So he was the critical philosopher. Critical philosopher. Or what we call that German idealism, and we call also the enlightenment philosophy. Enlightenment philosophy. Some of the stories, because this talk is based mostly on the biographical sketch and some of the basic concepts. And people say that he was so disciplined person, Immanuel Kant, that people would just keep the watch of the steps of Immanuel Kant. When Immanuel Kant would just walk through the streets, and people would know that what will be the time this time, because he was a disciplined figure. But unfortunately, when he went to study when he was trained in Königsberg, and he did join the college, there he won the prize. There he won the prize for his activities there, because he was a very good student. Now in 1746, and what happened 1746? That's one of the important dates. That's one of the important dates in the field of philosophy, which I think that was the important date in this sense that gave responsibility to Immanuel Kant, and something that had it not happened, maybe Immanuel Kant would have been a great philosopher, he was a great philosopher, but he would have just contributed more and more. But I would say that this responsibility made him something more. His father died, and he had to come back from the university studies, and then he had to be a private tutor. And when he came back, he worked for 10 years to support the family. So this was 1746. 1746. And he was the fourth child. His father had 9 children, and he was the fourth child. And he survived, and his brothers, the elder brothers, they also reached to elder age. Somehow I would say that, but this was the only person who was a very intelligent person. Now, Kant divided certain theories also, which we will deal. That's the theory of nebular hypothesis, I will call that. That means that how the solar system is of, and what's the solar system made of? That's of nebula stuff. That's of nebula stuff. This we have to study. This we have to study. And we have to study also about the concept of God given by Immanuel Kant, and the concept of time and space. Time and space. When we are talking about the time and space within this limited world, time and space within this limited world, or can we think beyond this time and space, or can we think within this time and space? What exactly is this that we have to discuss in next talk also. And also we'll talk about his metaphysics, because he was the professor. He was the professor of ethics. He taught ethics for a long time. He taught ethics for a long time. And he did not agree. We have to see on what reasons he did not agree with Descartes fully, because they would believe that it's only Mendel that would know the reality of God. But he would also believe in some of the experiences you just use in practical reason. By using practical reason, you can gain the knowledge step by step that we have to deal. Also, more things about why he had differences with the thought of John Locke, thought of Berkeley, idealistic materialism, what we call, and also about David Hume. And I would just like to recapitulate that we had today the talk about Immanuel Kant. He was a philosopher, and he did write about the general natural history and the theory of the heavens. General natural history and the theory of heavens. And the second point, he was the fourth child of his father. And his father's name was John George Kant. John George Kant. I write here, I neglected to write here John George Kant. That's why some people say he took the John George Kant, and he took the name Kant. But some people say that when Immanuel Kant got well versed in Hebrew, he studied also the Hebrew, and he did change his name to this Kant. He did change his name to Kant. And 1990, he was then a very efficient philosopher to deal with different thoughts, and also got a degree in 1970 is also one of the dates wherein he got as a full-fledged place. He got a full-fledged place for being a professor. Being a professor, that means he then influenced more. He then influenced more his students. And also you would see that it's called that he was a very pious philosopher. It is Immanuel Kant, he says that without morals you cannot run a society. The moral is important. That's why when we see the metaphysics of morals, he wrote in 1997, that carries a very, very influence on the when we study. And he has his difference. We'll see that with Leibniz he had his difference. And also the thoughts, like he was influenced with Spinoza, he was influenced with Greek philosophy, he was influenced with what we call the medieval philosophers, and he was influenced, and what kind of influence he did carry. So for that, I would say that you need to be more with us for the next talk. And for that, you need to subscribe our videos to get free of cost. And for that, you can note also my address, BUKHARIHAMID786 @gmail.com. So see you in our next talk. Till then, goodbye.